And we're sort of asking the wider question a little bit about whether our special relationship with the States is coming under threat.
Is it even there anymore? So Keir Starmer has now publicly criticised Donald Trump, who claimed, of course, that NATO troops weren't exactly on the front line in Afghanistan. He said his remarks were insulting and, frankly, appalling.
Let me start by paying tribute to the 457 of our armed services who lost their lives in Afghanistan. I will never forget their courage, their bravery, and the sacrifice that they made for their country. There are many also who were injured, some with life-changing injuries. And so I consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling. And I'm not surprised they've caused such hurt to the loved ones of those who were killed or injured.
I think he sounds quite angry there, actually, understandably so. I'm not going to criticise him for that. Overnight, a White House spokesperson has told us that President Trump is absolutely right. The United States of America has done more for NATO than any other country in the alliance has done combined. That's not the point.
No.
That's not about what he was saying,
That's not the point
really.
of the outrage, is it?
No.
Prince Harry has now weighed in on the debate, actually with a very carefully worded statement, which simply says, I served there, I made lifelong friends there, and I lost friends there. The United Kingdom alone had 457 service personnel killed. Thousands of lives were changed forever. Mothers and fathers buried sons and daughters.
Well said, Harry. Actually. Could this be the start of a fractured relationship between the UK and the US? Should the President apologise?
Well, let's hear now from an Afghanistan veteran himself, Andrew Fox, who joins us now. A very good morning to you, Andrew. What was your first impression, your first thoughts when you heard President Trump said that? And have you sort of changed your thoughts at all overnight?
Well, really, a sort of head-shaking anger and mild degree of outrage at Mr. Trump would say something so obtuse. But, you know, in terms of the way my opinion is developed, what I'd really like to say is certainly to everyone watching this who spoke out online and who spoke up for our veterans and our service personnel, it's very much appreciated, because Afghanistan does feel a bit like a forgotten war sometimes. And to know that people remember it and hold us in high acclaim as the people who fought there is really one of the good things to come out of this.
It just seems remarkable that President Trump would in effect say that people like you did not serve alongside the Americans, you served below them or behind them, when we know that isn't the case.
Well, I spent 6 months with an American Special Forces unit, and I was awarded a combat infantryman's badge, which is the one you get for being shot at. So, you know, the Americans themselves know that's not true. But in my 3 tours in Afghanistan, I served alongside Danes, Estonians, the Czechs, the Dutch. We saw Australians, Canadians. You know, this was a team effort, and I think anyone who actually served there would know this. Obviously, Mr. Trump never served. He dodged military service with bone spurs. But the point is that everyone who was on the ground there knew that it was almost a noble endeavour, and you'd go into the fight, and it wouldn't matter who was to your right or left, you know, what country's flag they had on their arm. You know, we'd all go into battle for each other, and this has really taken something quite noble and like a warrior-like ethos, and has turned it into something a little bit more tainted from Mr. Trump's comments. So that's just really sad to see.
Do you think his comments weren't so much meant to criticise anyone's soldiers and to say that anyone was in any way... well, he did actually say there were, but he said some NATO troops. In other words, it was just sort of almost a political criticism of NATO rather than saying that soldiers didn't serve bravely. I mean... He didn't mean it personally, I think. Do you think that's possible? I'm trying to find a way of sort of rationalising his comments.
Well, look, I think it plays into a wider narrative on that side of the Atlantic, where he is trying to sort of run down the NATO alliance. You know, even the way he talks about it as if NATO were a separate thing to the US, when of course they've been the founding members and they've been, you know, the key linchpin of NATO during the Cold War. You know, this is an American endeavour, and yet now it's being spoken about as if NATO are them and us is America, and that's clearly very wrong on many levels. So I suspect there's in combination with the threats he's recently made against fellow NATO members like Denmark. This is all part of a bigger picture building where I don't think the White House sees NATO as useful. They don't want it to continue, but they also don't want to unilaterally withdraw. So they just run down the alliance, because alliances run on trust. And if you don't have trust anymore, the alliance won't work. So I think he's being politically quite clever, actually.
There's nothing more important than keeping your money and your identity safe online. And with so many VPN options available, choosing the right one can be pretty daunting. But this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, is making the choice easier for GB News viewers. ExpressVPN is offering up to 75% off, plus 4 extra months free. That's top-level security from just £2.49 a month, and you're covered by their 30-day money-back guarantee. So just click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code now. Remember, when you're online, you are often sharing personal data, so hackers can steal your information, your passwords, your photos, and your bank details in just seconds. But ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. So why choose ExpressVPN? Well, it couldn't be easier to use. With just one click, you are protected. And ExpressVPN uses military-grade AES 256 encryption, which is the same standard trusted by the US government to guard their classified information. With their new tiered plans, you can protect up to 14 devices at once and manage passwords securely. Live chat support is available 24/7, and it typically connects you in under a minute with a real person. Click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off ExpressVPN, plus 4 months extra for free. Start protecting yourself today with ExpressVPN.
Every cloud has a silver lining, and I wonder if we can at least take some comfort, Andrew, from the fact that there is so much outrage about what was said. I mean, when we think of, and I keep saying it this morning, 457 families changed forever, thousands of people affected by those deaths, not to mention those with physical and mental injuries as a result of this. At least we are coming to support them. We are behind them in this when they've been slighted. That's got to be at least something slightly positive, hasn't it?
To an extent, I went to 13 funerals of friends and colleagues over the Afghanistan period, and my thoughts were very much with them in the immediate aftermath of Mr. Trump's comments. It must be horrifying to hear your child or your husband or your daughter's sacrifice be denigrated in such a way. Not to mention the friends that I know who've lost legs and lost their eyesight from Afghanistan. That must have been a far more brutal body blow than it was to just the average veteran. As I said right at the top, if you look at that outpouring of support that immediately followed from so many different countries, I've seen Estonians, Danes, Canadians all posting about their support for the troops who served in Afghanistan. That groundswell, certainly for me, and I hope for them, really did outweigh anything that came out of Mr. Trump's mouth.
Is there any way, and a lot of our viewers are pointing this out already, we can turn our outrage at President Trump's comments into something positive for our own veterans? In other words, we as a country should look after our own veterans and our serving forces better than we do.
Well, I think that there are a raft of military charities out there who still do the incredible work to this day. There are still people who need ongoing support when they need the armed forces, and the charity sector does an incredible job of stepping up. My own regimental charity is Support Our Paras, and I've seen the incredible work that they do firsthand. And I think when it comes to the government, certainly, veteran care is something that we need to make sure that is on their radar, and they are taking action to. And then, of course, properly funding our armed forces so that when they go into the next conflict, we don't get a repeat of Iraq where they're driving around in vehicles that aren't fit for purpose. So there's a number of things I think that we as the people, if you will, can do to both support charities, support our veterans, and make sure the government get this right.
That's a very good point. Andrew, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thanks for your service too.
Yeah. All right. Here in the studio, US political commentator Jennifer Ewing. Before we have a look at Chagos, which I know we're going to talk about in a minute, can I ask you about this? Because, and this might not be resonating at home for President Trump, but he's caused a lot of damage on his reputation for even those people here who might actually support him.
Absolutely, and I certainly did not come on to defend any of his statements. You know, as has been said over and over, you know, they're hurtful, they're insulting, and they're incorrect, right? They're absolutely incorrect. So, you know, not going to defend it. I was also looking up the times in which, because I know your colleague, your Washington-based colleague, Ben Leo, had inquired about whether or not an apology would be coming, and it sounds like the White House doubled down and said, no, we meant everything we said. I do believe he was talking more in general as a slam on NATO. Still not the point. I was looking up times that Trump had apologized in the past, few and far between. I don't think that he is gonna come out and give an outright apology. What I do think, and segueing into the Chagos, is that you're going to see, as President Trump pays more and more attention to this Chagos deal being put on hold, he's going to start talking about the special relationship and the U.S. and the U.K. and how we have fought together in the past and how we need to protect this Diego Garcia. Just a thought. Again, inexcusable what he said.
But he can, just at the flick of a switch, change the whole narrative, can't he? He could say something about Chagos or even Iran today, and suddenly we'll be talking about completely different things tomorrow.
Sure. And, you know, we can't overstate it enough, inexcusable comments, but also what would be a shame is a lot of the good things that came out of Davos this week, which was, you know, NATO and indeed the UK really does need to start paying attention to the open border, to the fact that they cannot protect themselves militarily without the US help. So these are some good things that energy security was another huge one that, I mean, you know, we all pay electricity bills in this country 5 times that of the US because we refuse to drill. So, you know, there are a lot of good issues that I think if the UK were to reflect upon, I'd hate to see it too distracted by these disgraceful comments.
Yeah. In terms of Chagos, the government must be reeling a little bit. I mean, they've pulled the deal, they've pulled the bill for now. But it seems to be sort of linked to this treaty, US-UK treaty from 1966, and obviously President Trump saying it's a stupid thing to do. But it was only 6 months ago or so that he sort of said, yeah, fine. And so he sort of seemed to give it the green light.
Yeah, you're right. And I think I've been trying to think about this, and there's one of two things. Either he was not paying attention, he either hadn't been poorly advised. My understanding is somebody had told him the UK doesn't have a choice in it, right? Number one. Number two, we know that he can be at these bilateral meetings, you know, whether it's with Prime Minister Starmer, whether it's with Erdogan of Turkey, he can be quite deferential. And actually, it's sometimes when he's most diplomatic and polite. So I think he was probably just being polite to the Prime Minister when he first said that. But anybody that knows him knows his America First agenda, especially knows after the week that we've all just, you know, spent discussing Greenland, you know, there is no way he would have been okay with handing this back over to Mauritius, because one of his biggest, you know, desires is to keep Russia away from China and, you know, this.
But it was weird the other day. What was it? Yesterday, he said, "I don't know why the British, you know, are giving them to Chagos to Mauritius. Maybe they need the money." And it's as though he hadn't quite got that we're paying to give them away. We're not selling them.
And it's so funny because somebody actually did say, wait till he finds out that actually the Brits are paying for this. Like, you know, because, you know, he probably thought, oh, poor London, you know, poor England, it's going down the toilet. You know, the growth, I mean, the growth numbers that came out in the United Kingdom compared to the U.S. the other day, it's, you know, the U.S. is like 44 times of the growth. So he probably thinks, these guys need the money. So again, no excuse. He's got a lot going on, has changed his mind or never really understood what he said.
So is it true to say sometimes that he just says things without thinking?
Yes.
Oh,
absolutely.
But he's the president.
Sometimes, yes. Often, I know. And the other thing is, I mean, look, it's only been, a year and a few days? I mean, this man is involved in so many different things. So he's 80 years old, and, you know, he's going to misstep sometimes.
Can he put the brakes on this? because of this? Do we know if this treaty from 50-odd years ago, can he actually stop this from happening?
I mean, that's a great question. I'm not, a lawyer, so that's probably best question asked to somebody else. But yes, I think politically he can stop it happening. One of the biggest things about this peace board that was announced over the week is we need to separate Russia from China. That was the big threat that he saw in not ending the Russia-Ukraine war, is putting Russia and China closer together. This will be another example of that, and he'll probably win the PR battle on that, as well as in this country.
OK, Jennifer, good to see you. Thank you.
Wish he'd say something about the Chinese embassy being built near the Tower of London as well. Might put a stop to that.
Yeah.